Right, I'll introduce the next speaker then. And then we'll have a break after this. So it's my pleasure to introduce Francois Barbira-Freedman. She'll be talking about the medicine from the Amazon and the preservation of culture. And Francois did her fieldwork in Peru in the 1970s on ayahuasca in the Amazonia with the Jacuash Lamista. And her research was looking at applying the knowledge of shamanic plants to women's health. And she has since set up a charity which she coordinates called Birthlight, which aims to promote the enjoyable experience of pregnancy, birth, and babies. And she is a lecturer in medical anthropology at Cambridge University. So please join me in welcoming again, Francois.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So in my talk, I will expand the context that David presented in a sort of more grounded way and look at the connection between ayahuasca and the medicinal knowledge of people. I won't be talking so much about midwifery today, but I want to say how happy I am to be in the October Gallery again and to be here for the new edition of the Ayahuasca Reader. And it's a rejoinder to Francisco Montes, who was an Amazonian shaman with whom I've worked for many years, and who was here in 2000 when the first edition of the book came out. So in a way, this talk is a rejoinder to his work, and 10 years later, or what happened 15 years later. So there is something in common to all Amazonian, the whole Amazonian basin about the relation between the psychedelics and the knowledge of and use of plants. And the principles of healing are the same, and the understanding of disease is the same. And there are differences. Between the lowlands and the highlands of the Amazon in terms of plants. And what is remarkable is that people have always made use of both, so that they travel constantly to the floodplain and then back to the out to the upper Amazon region, where there is more biodiversity and the plants are stronger because there is more sun. So part of my study has been the very extensive networks of contacts between shamans and tribal groups, and also how people will travel and how plants travel and seeds travel with them. And so these are the various areas in which I have done fieldwork. They have something in common. They all have the same language, which is Quechua of the forest. And this is an image of Sangama. And Sangama was like the original the person who inspired Schultes one of the people who inspired Schultes to do his work. He died in Iquitos in 1976, but he was the repository of this encyclopedic medicinal knowledge, and he sent plants to Harvard to the Natural History Museum. He was the first one to really bring ayahuasca and Amazonian medicine together. And he's actually not very highly, he's not so well known and so not so rated, but except from the books of Rio Tigre and beyond, and there were some books written about him. So this is an example of how shamans travel widely in order to acquire their knowledge. So in the West, we still think about trial and error as a source of discovery of the power of plants. But as Jeremy showed in his book and many others, actually there is a synergy, truly a synergy between observation, transmitted knowledge, and divination, and the visions of the plants coalesce all the past observations and the transmission of knowledge into a new capacity for diagnosis of illness and for treatment. And it's also this successive acquisition of knowledge from different people in different places that make people able to see through the body, like we've seen earlier in David's talk. So this is Francisco's personal journey, but I would say that each genuine shaman in the Amazon has traveled probably, well, at least hundreds, if not thousands of kilometers through their life in order to gain knowledge, exchange knowledge of plants, and experiment with new plants. So Schultes said that he was always fascinated with how people discovered active plants, and he was, of course, one of the botanists and who was, together with he and Prance after him, extolled the ability and the true knowledge of Amazonian indigenous people. So one of the things we need to realize is that the plants, the medicinal plants, including ayahuasca and other psychedelics, are not found in the rainforest. They are found in habitats that have already been modified by man. Somewhere in between these two pictures, of course, the picture on the right is absolutely terrifying, and this is what threatens a lot of the Amazon at the moment. But it's where you have disturbed soil, where you have another use of the word synergy, a synergy between humans and nature. And the ayahuasca is planted by people, and then it escapes in the wild and it's found again. So these big trunks that David was talking about, they may be ancestor trunks, like maybe great-great-grandfathers of the vine that is now growing in a village, and people keep them in secret locations. And it's always been very moving for me when we've been looking for these ancestor plants, because they are very strong and amazing. So there are lots of little sites where people look after their plants. And this is one of the things that have changed with ayahuasca tourism, that there is, these little gardens have disappeared, and now you have like more of mass plantations, and it changes something about the synectic and including synesthetic relation of the shaman and his plants, because a shaman is very intimately connected with his plants, and growing the plants is very important. So I've taken the example of tobacco, which there is no ayahuasca without tobacco in the Amazon. The two always go together. And nicotine is very negatively seen by medicine, although it has it has properties of it has healing properties, and it's used, for example, in the treatment of Alzheimer. But on the whole, this again, to use the word synergy again, the synergy between tobacco and ayahuasca is downplayed. However, tobacco is said to be the father of all plants, the activator of ayahuasca. And when you take ayahuasca in the Amazon, you're always given somehow tobacco, and tobacco is used to prepare the plant when it's brewed. So tobacco was long ago the first plant to seduce the West, even in the 16th century, and it's now revived in some of the new ayahuasca ceremonial complexes. So here you have the picture of a Cariri Choco shaman from the northeast of Brazil. And he actually imports ayahuasca from the western part of Brazil called Acre. He brings it to England every summer to work with young male drug addicts. It's been now coming for 7 consecutive summers and has wonderful results. But he also uses his pipe, and he makes all these young men smoke their shanduka, their pipe, as well as taking ayahuasca once a year or sometimes 2 or 3 times. So we know what how tobacco works, and it's still not clear whether the tryptamines are created in the pineal gland, but there is definitely an interaction with the nicotinic receptors. And I think this needs to be brought out into the collective consciousness, even if tobacco is like completely not on. So these pipes, there are many different pipes in the Amazon. This is one of the most traditional pipes. And it is used in medicine to blow into the orifices of the bodies. So the crown of the head, the palms of the hands, the soles of the feet, and the navel are entries in which the smoke can dissolve boundaries that maybe have become toxic for the person. And then the person is given ayahuasca to open consciousness. So it's a whole complex that needs to be thought of together. And people use tobacco in the Amazon in a different way. So the hunters communicate with animals, and the shamans use it in this therapeutic way. And tobacco, as well as ayahuasca, have spirits, and it is those spirits which come to the shamans as helpers, and as there is no using these substances without communicating with the spirits. And this is a painting by Francisco, which was actually displayed here in the gallery, and then was replicated in the Eden Project in Cornwall. And Francisco painted it on a stone in the Eden Project, and it's the mother of the ayahuasca. So a lot of these images of spirits have to do with reproduction, not just sexual reproduction, but sometimes out of the head, out of the navel, all sorts of reproductions, in the way that people observe with snakes, with some fish. So hermaphroditism is very common in the Amazon, and people are really fascinated by the reproduction of plant and animals, and they use this knowledge in their medicine. So I've taken a quote by Pablo Amaringo, who was actually the nephew of Francisco Cordoba, the old shaman, so that Francisco is a cousin of Pablo. So you have these genealogies in the Amazon of shamans, and they are interconnected. And there have been also exhibitions of these paintings in this gallery, and I think David used a few in his talk as well. But it's the idea of an animated forest, and that you can't go anywhere without stumbling across spirits or opening into spirits. So the trees, each plant has a mother spirit, and as you take ayahuasca, you discover a connection with the mother spirit of one plant or another, so that each shaman will have a repertoire, a healing repertoire, which is based on personal connection with these entities. And all the plants, so you can do it both ways. You can communicate with the plant, and then the ayahuasca will show you what this plant is about. Or you can take ayahuasca and ask a question, and then the ayahuasca will tell you what this plant is about. So it's there are different ways of learning, but this is how people find the knowledge. And there is a very thin line between the healing plants and the killing plants. And there are many substances that can be used for healing and that can also be used as poisons. So some shamans are also poison makers, and the shamans are people who have the knowledge of this distinction between the poisons and the healing substances. And our idea of poison, actually every drug is a poison, and it's how far you go in the use of poison. And they observe very much how animals use things. So the people I worked with, the Quechua Lamas, as Schultes and also as Spruce. Spruce spent 2 years in this area, and the English botanist Spruce, and he became fascinated with their preparation of curare, and they are still to this day preparing curare. They used to export their curare thousands of kilometers away into the lower Amazon, and also to the Shuar people, the people who reduced heads, so in Ecuador. So that gives you an idea of the scale of exchanges. And the preparation of curare is very dangerous, and people need to take ayahuasca or be prepared with diet, the 5 Ds, in order to not be subject to the toxicity. They also take a lot of purges. And the ayahuasca that comes to London, funny enough, is selected. There has been a selection of brews over the last 15 years, so that the effects of vomiting and shitting are much reduced. Actually, there are some. The ayahuasca makes you vomit, but I have rarely seen diarrhea effects in ceremonies held in Europe or even or elsewhere outside, and in the lodges. People don't like that, so it doesn't happen. And the selection of the brews is a very interesting process, because you can, of course, it's been for millennia. People have made new brews, and as David said, this has revitalized in some way the tradition of ayahuasca. Although I think, in my view, it was never endangered. It has just transformed it. So tobacco's been reduced, the brews have been enhanced, so that you have more vision, less unpleasant effects. But actually, these were the effects that were considered to be the most medicinal. And in the place where I work, it's called purga. So it's a purge. It cleans you completely, and that's what's good about it. And once you're completely clean, then you strengthen. And there are lots of plants and vines that are used to strengthen you, and they have an extensive knowledge of these plants, and they're nearly always related to sexuality, because the index of good health is good sexual health, even if you're old. It doesn't matter. It's like how do you feel in yourself is always the test. So these plants, particularly for men, I must say, are very, very popular in Amazonian medicine. And some of these plants have been taken into Western pharmacopoeia, and this is cat's claw, and you may have heard of cat's claw for the use of the immune system. So this was part of the ayahuasca complex for millennia, and so was sangre de grado, which is this resin, an exudance from from a tree, and now it's being sold in. I think it's easy to access on the internet, but sangre de grado is also a powerful hallucinogenic tree, as well as producing a healing resin. And so we can't think of just ayahuasca as a brew. We need to put it back in its forest, in its healing forest, as Schultes said. And this is a sanango, which it's a small shrub that I think Jeremy talks about in his first book, because he had tennis elbow. And there are always two kinds of plants, male and female, and there's nothing to do with the Linnean classification. It's a specific Amazonian classification of plants as male and female, and you have to learn this vocabulary. And when you live in the rainforest, you have to deal with fevers, and of course quinine is so well known, and you have to understand how to prepare the remedies. And this is apparently the most simple way of preparing a remedy, and it's excrojar. It's like twisting the plant so that you have the juice of the leaves, and you drink that. And this is used a lot in reproductive medicine for women. And this is Yawar Piri Piri, and it's all these bulbs are also used, and they are very hallucinogenic. So when women take medicine, they take it at two levels. They take it at the physical level to stop bleeding, for example, but they also take it as in a spiritual way. And it's very frightening sometimes to have these effects, but it's understood. So for us, we would try to take the active principles. I've been working on this Yawar Piri Piri because I think it has lots of potential for female health, but there is no interest in looking at the psychedelic properties of this plant. Of course, nobody really wants to try it, but it's very interesting. And the invaders' diseases. So, yes, local cures for cancer, for diabetes, for other chronic diseases, but mainly diabetes and malaria. So we have the shamans now being called upon, and lodges being created for very thousands of Westerners going to get this knowledge, and sometimes with good results. So, yeah, that's good. And what fascinates me the most is the relation between ayahuasca and the trees, because in the upper Amazon, people say that ayahuasca is just the door, the little door, like Alice in Wonderland's little door, little rabbit hole door. And then you go further, you go into the trees, and the trees are the shamans. And my next book is about this. And this is a Remo Caspi, which is used for the treatment of malaria. But the bark has a very strong hallucinogenic properties. So I had to wait until I did my menopause in order to actually experiment with these barks, because they are too strong for women who have periods. And you can't use. It's unsafe to use them until you complete your reproductive cycle. So now I'm really excited about you discovering these things, but very carefully because they are so strong. So I'm very careful. And so ayahuasca doesn't cure things directly. That's what people tell you. It's like a diagnostic tool. And my teacher used to say, oh, it's like a chamber of mirrors. If you're not careful, yes, it reveals a lot of things, but it doesn't allow you to move forward. You need to find a way forward. So yeah, Manuel Córdoba was very wise about that. And ayahuasca was always considered as entry level. And then you move on. You move on to the perfumes, you move on to the trees, or you move on to other, there are five paths of shamanism. So ayahuasca, tobacco, and sound, as David was telling us in his talk, the synesthesia, the sound, the ruffle of the leaves, the rattle. The rattle is the other instrument. And there is this, for me, this trilogy is the most important. The dance comes maybe outside ayahuasca and the diet, but the chanting is very much part of it. So we've already seen the tryptamine plant, but many people use brugmansias in their brews. And this is, of course, a little bit more delicate to use, stronger, but with different effects. So that's how you make, it's like a top chef or maybe a musician. You modulate the effects of your brew. And this is Francisco. I wanted to have him in this talk together with his apprentice. And we have just had an amazing ayahuasca ceremony in there. And then it's really the transformation. And Francisco himself has been, I went to look for him last year and he moved out. Like the ayahuasca tourism has been too much for him. He had to withdraw, and actually he's focusing on tobacco use, which is interesting. So this is the new phenomenon, and Iquitos is probably the mecca of ayahuasca. And in parallel with that, you have the search for drugs, and it's a long story, the search for drugs. So my little contribution has been to try to give back the conservation, put back the conservation in the hands of the people. So we have a little reserve called Yakumamai Reserve, which is patronized by the University of Cambridge, and we set up this reserve in an old rubber plantation that has trees that are so old that they die on their roots, and they collapse from old age. It's quite spectacular. And we created a little company spin out of Cambridge University called Ampika, and it's been an 8 years adventure. But what is really funny is that the plant that was selected out of all this extraordinary Pharmacopia of Amazonia is a little salady kind of plant from the when you open a path and you have some cleared ground, and that's where it grows. And it's a plant that I had completely forgotten about. And it's when I had my wisdom teeth in my early 20s when I first went to this area. And I was in terrible pain. And without asking me or me saying anything, they made a little wad of this plant, and I had to hold it chew it, and the pain vanished. And then 2.5 hours later, same thing. And after a few applications, I had no pain at all. So I somehow, working with some neuroscientists in Cambridge, I remembered this plant, and it was tested against lidocaine, and actually was much stronger than lidocaine. So the idea was to create a new Bonjela, a natural Bonjela. And it's now ready to go to market. But I wanted also to give it back to the people, not to have it as a drug that would go back to the Amazon. So this is the garden of the Institute of Amazonian Studies in Iquitos, and they made a little bottle of this tincture that is now sold on the markets. And here you see the Iquitos herb market. And people, I work with a local dentist in Iquitos, and he has a free clinic every week, and he uses that. So no injections, just this, and it works. So I'm waiting for this. But unfortunately, the imports are much stronger. So now we need to save this knowledge, absolutely imperative to not just ayahuasca, but ayahuasca can be the platform to embrace this Amazonian medicine and to create conservation projects, not just little gardens around the lodge, but true conservation partnerships. And this is the last quote, which is from Schultes. And I think that's totally true, that I have tried to give talks to my colleagues in Cambridge about how Amazonian people think of learning about plants through visions. And I'm sorry, it's fallen completely flat. They never invite me again when I talk.
You mentioned a couple of medicines that have been developed on the basis of plants, and now you're ready to market them.
Yeah.
And my question is, if we look back like 20 years ago with shaman pharmaceuticals, and Takiwasi making all the sangue de grada, etc., and some other Americans wanted to make a quick buck.
Yeah.
Okay, but do you have a kind of analogous system of how you want to develop your medicines on the basis of how they are used in the field, or are you just kind of haphazardly? I mean, what's your strategy?
Okay, long story. Long story. The first thing is that I learned a lot from shaman pharmaceuticals. I didn't want to repeat the way their model at all. I'm not convinced by their model, because particularly the way that they redistributed the profits to people. So I spent a lot of time with lawyers in Cambridge developing a slightly different model. I also learned from Takiwasi, and I think they are doing really well, Takiwasi, and actually I am talking with them about developing a natural anesthetic, which is slightly improved upon the one that is used in Iquitos at the moment. It's a bit better than a tincture, but it's not a drug. But I have a lot of trouble convincing people that it's worth developing a natural product. Fortunately, there is a need for a teething gel for babies. People prefer to buy a natural product. There are two. The Bonjela is still on the market, and there is a new one, and they are both based on lidocaine with a few additives. And I think there is a future for this, but I also have had an intern from Brazil who has been playing with molecules and created new molecules, and we are now testing these molecules. So these are two different routes. I have to follow both and see where they go. But of course, my preference is for using it the way it is used. But we have cultivated artificially this plant in a greenhouse. We've created new varieties by mixing different seeds, by growing different seeds and combining them.
sorry, just a little sub-question. If we go further, then what's your marketing strategy? Is it health food stores, or because we're selling aloe vera and uña de gato and the pau d'arco since 30 years ago?
Yes.
But what's your strategy for?
The strategy is local market, and then it's pharmaceutical companies. So we've avoided Glaxo. We've had an approach from Glaxo. And at the moment, I'm working with a small company in Germany. So we're going for the middle level.
Thank you for that question. We'll have more time for questions on the panel at the end. So we're going to have a break now for 15 minutes.
I'm sorry because I've taken so long.
Oh, no, that's perfect. That's fine. I've got. You hear me talk to you.